Hi, general psychology students. In this video, I'm going to go over some aspects of the cognitive influences on learning, so cognitive learning. I'm going to talk about latent learning with cognitive maps. I'm going to talk about observational learning and mirror neurons, as well as pro-social and antisocial aspects of that. So this is more of the cognitive stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about latent learning. Latent learning came about because of the research of Tolman. So what he did is he had some mice, and he had them in three groups. Group A went through the maze that he had, and they got reinforced immediately. So there was, I don't know, say cheese sitting at the end of the maze for them. And so he had them go through the maze every single day to see how quickly they learned how to get through it. Group B was reinforced after 10 days. And group C was never reinforced. There was never any cheese sitting at the end of that maze. And what he did is he timed how long it took him to go through the maze over the course of a few weeks. So it looked a little something like this. Group A, the one that got reinforced immediately, at the first, it took them a while to go through the maze, but eventually they started learning and their time slowed down. Got faster. They were able to get better at the maze. So it kind of looked like that until it leveled out because there's only so fast their feet can run. Group B, then we'll do the never reinforced group. The group that was never reinforced looked like that. They had no reason to ever learn how to get through the maze, so they basically never learned how to get through the maze, is what people assumed. So at this point, this sounds like absolutely traditional operant conditioning. Because this group had a reinforcement at the end, they learned how to do it. Because this group was not reinforced, they didn't learn how, is what the operant conditioning people would say about this. However, things get a little tricky with this group. So I want you to think, how is this group, these mice, how are they going to get through the maze? What's going to happen at the 10-day mark? The way it worked out for this group, so it looked a little something like this. The first 10 days were just like the others. What happened at that point, though, is the tricky part. At that point is when you have the change. That is when you see it look a little something like this. Once they started getting the cheese, it wasn't that they started learning at that point. It's that they basically became exactly like this original group. What Tolman was showing here was latent learning. Latent learning is learning that remains hidden until it becomes useful to show it. So the definition for that would be learning that remains hidden until its presence becomes useful. Once it actually helped to show that the mice knew how to get through the maze, once there was actually some benefit to it, there was cheese sitting at the end, they were hustling through that thing. What Tolman was able to show is that learning goes on all the time. The operant conditioning people are wrong in assuming that you only learn through punishments and reinforcements. What Tolman showed is that you are always learning no matter what. You are only going to show the learning through reinforcements and punishments. So all of these mice were learning the whole time. If this group all of a sudden at day 20 started getting cheese, their score would also drop dramatically and would match these other groups. All of them know how to get through the maze. It's just that the ones with cheese sitting at the end have a reason to show they know how to get through this. And what they're using to get through this maze is their cognitive maps. So those cognitive maps, those are mental images of the layout of your environment. So all of the mice were creating a cognitive map, but only the ones that were getting a reinforcement decided to show that they had this cognitive map created. So that is latent learning. Observational learning is the other thing to go over, and observational learning also falls into cognitive learning. It's often part of a type of psychology called social cognition, because your environment, your social environment is helping you learn, but it's really you thinking through what's going on in your environment. So that's why I'm throwing it in here as well. So let me clear this slate off and we will get started on observational learning. So there's a video of Bandura talking about observational learning. I'm just going to go over a few extra things connected to it, a few factors to keep in mind. So the basic structure of observational learning is the Bobo doll study that Bandura did, where kids who saw an adult beat Bobo were more likely to then beat Bobo themselves and to be more violent in general. They liked the guns more. They were less likely to play with the toy kitchen. Even the gentle dolls the gentle toys like the doll, they'd find ways to turn it violent. So watching violence makes you more violent. And there were a couple of ways that people tried to fight this study. So for example, they said, oh, that's because they're in the room with the person. If a kid's watching TV, then they're not going to become more violent because it's television. It's a little removed. So Bandura did the study where they watched a video of an adult beating Bobo. Lo and behold, the kids went and were beating Bobo as well. And then they said, oh, it's because it's like adults. If they're watching cartoons or something that's obviously fake like that, then that's okay to see violence because they know that like cartoons aren't real. So Bandura did a version where it was, I think it was like someone dressed up as a cat or a mouse. Someone dressed up as an animal beating Bobo. And lo and behold, the kids still went and beat Bobo. So it didn't matter if it was a human or an animal. It didn't matter if it was live or on television. If they saw violence, they became more violent. And so they're more likely to do it though. There's a few factors that make this observational learning more likely. One is if the person who's modeling the behavior, the person who's doing that specific behavior, is similar to you. So you are more likely to do it if it's someone that looks like you. If the person is successful, so if they get something good out of doing this behavior, and if it's someone admirable, so the superhero versus the villain. So admirable, successful, and similar to us are more likely to make it happen. And what is going on here, one thing that's going on here is something called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons play a part in this. A mirror neuron is a neuron that fires when you perform a certain action or when you watch someone else perform that action. So when you are beating someone up or when you are watching someone else beat someone up, the same neurons fire. So this helps you learn how to do an action. You are creating those connections in your neurons by observing in the same way you would be building those connections if you were doing it yourself. So this is the neural basis for learning through imitation, learning through observation. So for example, they had monkeys watch researchers eat ice cream. and they looked at their neurological activity, and it was the same watching these people eat ice cream as it was when the monkeys themselves were eating peanuts. So the same exact neurons were firing when they were eating versus when they were watching someone else eat. So you do this too. So for example, I think your book talks about if you're in a romantic relationship, the same neurons fire in your brain when you watch your partner look pained, look upset, as when you are in pain or upset. So for your brain, it's the same thing. It's as if you yourself were hurt, watching your partner be hurt. So you are learning at a neurological level by watching these people. So you can use this for good or evil. There are some pro-social factors to this. So for example, they did a study where they had kids who were really, really shy to the point where it affected their ability to function, watch a video of other kids who were obviously shy go up to a group and start playing with them, and the kids had fun, they weren't ostracized. And after watching that video of other shy kids actually trying to play with peers, the shy kids in the study had their shyness decrease. They were more willing to engage with their peers because they saw someone else do that as well. So there's some pro-social ways that this works. There's also some antisocial ways that this works. So for example, if you have abusive parents, you are more likely to be aggressive. This is one reason why researchers are very adamant that you do not spank your child. You are much more likely to have a child who is aggressive and physically violent if you spank them. And it makes sense in observational learning terms. If they see you get mad and use physical punishment, they are going to learn that when they are mad, they should be using physical punishment as well. You're more likely to see this sort of antisocial aspect, especially when it comes to violence, if the model, the person doing it, goes unpunished, if the behavior seems justified, if the victims don't show pain. Those are all factors that make it more likely that you are going to see this behavior. So, for example, if you see a video and the superhero beats someone up, and I mean, the superhero doesn't end up in jail for it, you're more likely to see it. He's beating up a bad guy, so the guy kind of deserved it. The kid's more likely to end up being violent. And if the person getting hurt doesn't act like they're in pain afterwards. So a lot of cartoons, you'll see this, or like WWF. The person is not sent to the hospital. They hop right back up and keep going for it. So all of those factors are going to make it more likely that this antisocial thing will play a part. So that is observational learning. Albert Bandura is the person that figured it out, and the Bobo doll study is the main study that shows it. And this is more likely in kids. As you get older, you're able to reason a little bit more, although there is some observational learning even into adulthood as well.